What is up, my crew? This is the Nook Podcast, and my name is Stephen Murphy. For this episode, I feel like I need to give any new listeners a little bit of context. As of the day of this recording, I have worked in television, video, and live event production for almost 33 years. I love this business, and I feel like I have a natural affinity for anyone I meet who is in any aspect of this business. If you continue to follow this podcast, you may find that I gravitate towards people with a similar bend, and I hope that you appreciate their perspectives. Today, my guest is Andrea Robinson. Andrea's career in TV news began at Fox 10 in Phoenix, Arizona in 2004. It continued there at the same station for the next 14 years, and that's something that doesn't happen very often in TV news. Like many of us have experienced at one time or another in our careers, Andrea dealt with a fair amount of success, but she also reached a point when she just knew that it was time to move on. Such outcomes are often viewed with great curiosity from the watching world, but Andrea handled things with such great poise and personal conviction. I think you will appreciate hearing some of the details behind what brought her to this decision. So settle in for my conversation with Andrea Robinson. All right, Andrea Robinson, I remember when you first hit the air, the youngster that you were. And having been in television quite a while, I could see your naivete, but I loved that you never seemed to try to portray yourself as anything but a fresh face on TV, and that you kind of became everybody's little sister at Fox 10 those mornings. What was that like for you, having that first big job?
That's a fun way to describe it. I love that. That was very endearing. So thank you for stating it in that way. Because I will say, it's funny you the way you said that, that I didn't portray to be something I was not. And I think early on, and I mean, you've been in this business a long time too, so you know, you've seen it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not to fault anyone, so I don't want to say it like that, but I think oftentimes you go into that business, especially being new, and you feel like you have to be somebody that you're not. You have to be this curated person, right? Mm-hmm. You have to not be your full true self, a version of it. And I think when you start your career like that, then you really box yourself into this corner of becoming somebody that you're not. And then it's like showing up to work and having to put a mask on and having to perform on a stage instead of going to work, trying to be as authentic and truthful to yourself as you can be. And, you know, hoping that people see who you really are and accept and embrace who you are. And Rick D'Amico, when I worked with him, he will probably always be one of the greatest mentors I ever had, because he really just encouraged me. And I remember him saying, when he would, try to mentor me and give me advice, was to literally just be yourself. And he said, there's so many people in this business that act like they're somebody that they're not. And at the end of the day, that business and that job, it's a job, right? It's just a job that looks different than maybe your neighbor's job, but it's still a job. You go to do work. And you're paid for it, and it puts food on the table, and you take care of your family, and it happens to be on TV. And so I think always having that sort of heart posture and mindset of that, of like, it's a job, and I'm not any better than anybody else because it happens to be on TV. Therefore, I shouldn't try to be somebody I'm not just because I'm on TV. And that's hard in that business, right? Because it's very, there's a lure to come to another side of being somebody that you're not. And it's easy to get sucked into that.
Well, and do you think, at the risk of making a really broad brush statement, do you think that that's where a lot of anchors, a lot of news types kind of fall into that as a bit of a trap? Is like, I come into this thinking that I've watched people do this for decades, and now I'm going to put on my thing to sound a lot like them. And eventually, I love how you put that eventually they're not themselves anymore.
Well, and then it's exhausting. I
Oh, I
mean,
can
I think we've
imagine.
all lived a portion of our life, and maybe it's just me, but I've gone through my life, and I think in that business there was portions of me that I portrayed as being, I have it all figured out. It's perfect. I have this curated perfection, and family, and this everything I wanted everyone to know was perfect. And that's exhausting. Just as performing in a way that's not truly you is exhausting. Going to work and not, yes, we all have to have a filter of some sort, right? We all have to have, we have to walk into our workplace with respect, and we can't just like bust in and like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. Like, we can't have that mindset and that sort of mentality. But I think this, especially the young people, I feel like I'm such an old person now. But right? Like you're like, I always feel like TV's kind of like football player age, right? You're like,
Oh,
what,
yes.
they retired? They're 40 some years old. Well, yeah, in TV years, everyone
Yep.
gets old real fast.
That exponential
but
aging.
I remember right? Yes. Towards the end of my time there, and I'd see a lot of these very young women come in, very, very young women. And I get it, right? They were maybe motivated or inspired by somebody, and they liked the way she did certain things or looked a certain way or voice was. And it's like, okay, that's great. Use that as something to sort of help you grow in your career, and use it as motivation and some inspiration. But that is not who you're going to become. Because if we just walk the coattails of somebody else and do it exactly like them, then we're not actually being the people that God called us to be. And we are each so uniquely talented, and our voices are so different, and our hearts are different, and there's so many things that the way we look, it's different. And that's how it's supposed to be, right? We're not supposed to walk in and especially in that business, be cookie cutter to the next person. And I think it's so, it's a very, very fine line to walk, and it's very easy to become somebody that you're not in that business, because you're thrust with opinions every single day.
Oh,
well,
I
you
can
should be more
imagine.
like this, or you should be thinner, or your hair doesn't look good like that. It should actually be more like that. Or, the way they ask questions, you should do it more like that. So then you start thinking, well, I'm not doing anything right. Then maybe I need to be more like them. And for fear of not being enough, and for fear of not being qualified enough to do that job, you start sort of molding yourself into somebody that you're not. And then you do that long enough, year after year after year, a job doesn't become exciting anymore, because you are walking in with a big mask on and almost a facade. And you've basically allowed viewers to come to know maybe just a version of you, or maybe a very coiffed, sort of masked up version of you, and they don't really know who you are.
Right. Well, then you have to be that much more thankful for an environment like you had, or at least, as a viewer, like you had at Fox 10, where it was so casual, and having a mentor like Rick D'Amico, who was so encouraging. And that's why I watched for years. I watched every morning, because it was like hanging out with friends over breakfast. And, even if it's like, okay, yeah, we get to the news and we'll cover the news, but there was just such a spirit about the way that you guys always did things that always felt so comfortable. So that had to be so good for someone like you starting so young.
Well, and I think that that it was always one of the best compliments was from viewers. Oh, we feel like we're your family. We feel like we're sitting having coffee together. And I think that goes back to the way there was such a sense of importance on who they hired, and camaraderie was everything. Because the minute you don't have camaraderie, I mean, think about it in any job, right? Anybody that's listening right now, you've been in a job, I'm sure, where the personalities, they don't really click. And it's really hard. It's really hard to be yourself. It's really hard to do your job. But then you might have been in an environment where the personalities albeit they might be a little different from one from the other, they just meshed really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there was a time when I was there that we just had this gold star team.
Yeah.
And the people that we were all so different and our ages were different. And we all brought something different to the table, but it allowed us each to shine in our own way. And, one wasn't shining and dulling the other way. It was just like the more everyone was sort of were themselves, the brighter that show became and the more exciting and enthusiastic and energized it was. And because the atmosphere was a little bit more casual, we could use this platform and this responsibility that we had to share the day's news and to share hard things that were happening in the world with our viewers, and in a family-like sort of environment of like, we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna get through this together because we're feeling the same thing you're feeling, but we're here to talk it out with you. We're gonna walk this with you. And I think that was what was so special about those years when we had that team in place. It just worked.
Yeah. Well, and what you just made me think of there was that there was such a camaraderie that the viewers sensed, that comfort level that I think breeds trust. So when there was some very heavy item that came down locally or nationally, internationally, whatever it was, and you all had to put on the very serious hat for a day or two, whatever that would march out. It's like we trusted you in those moments to tell us what was happening because it didn't feel biased and it didn't feel like you were just, somebody mouthing what they put on the teleprompter for you. We were talking about serious stuff too, and it worked.
Yeah. And I think that was always such when you say it like that too, it just, I realized what a responsibility it was, right? To have that opportunity to sit every morning and share those moments with our viewers who so graciously chose us every day to allow us into a very sacred time of the morning, right? With your family and you're getting the day started. And really what you turn on, TV, news-wise, or really anything, radio, whatever you're turning on or you are focusing on first in the morning, that's the direction your day goes.
Pretty much.
And I say that all the time. What you focus on grows. So if you're going to focus and you're going to turn on something that it's just nothing but nastiness or there's fighting or it's just, it's likely your energy level is going to follow that. And that's what you're going to carry on when you walk out of the four walls of your home. And so I even look at it now as so much more of a responsibility. And I always look back and I'm like, I hope I did that justice. And I hope I took that as seriously as possible. But Rick always reminded me, we are the viewer, right? Because if we weren't here, we'd be sitting at home watching this with them. And so our responsibility is to connect with them, but we are their bridge. We're bridging the gap between what's happening in the city and the community and the world to what's happening, to what they're hearing. Mm-hmm. And so we are their question asker, right? What they're thinking, we need to be able to ask to get the information that they need. This is not for our benefit. This is not for us to sit here and talk and let us hear our voices and let somebody think that we're smart or we know more than they know. We're learning and gathering just as much as they are. And I just remember him saying that in that way. And I thought, that's so great. And it was so humbling because it's so easy in a business like that. And I've seen it with people, you get high up here and on that, I know more. I'm in this position. I have authority. I have power. And it's like, not really. You've been gifted this responsibility and it's a beautiful opportunity, but we can really mess it up if we're not careful. And if we're here just sitting to talk and hear ourselves talk or to show somebody that we know something about something. No, we're here to gather the information. We're asking questions because we want to know too, because we don't know. And chances are the viewer doesn't know. We are the viewer and we are their place in sort of filtering that information. And then to be able to add your personality into it and have lighthearted moments and share, your heart when it's appropriate and all of that. I think it just brings you I think it just brings us all to this like level playing field of like, we're on the same team. We're all walking this life journey together. And, I'm scared too. There might be something crazy story that we're talking about. That's scary to me too. And if you want to be strong in a sense, but it's also okay to like, I'm a mom. This is hurting my heart too, just like it is yours. While you're sitting at home crying tears, I'm trying to hold it together too.
Right. Well, something you just mentioned there that I feel like I'd like to at least check into. You said you're on the air for 5.5 hours, 5 days a week. What time did your day start back in the day?
Oh, too early. That's how early. Way too early. I look back now and I think, how did I do that for that long?
Like what time did you get up?
At 2:30 a.m.
Oh.
2:30. Actually, I had this weird thing about alarms. So I would set it at 2:20 every single morning. I don't know why, sometimes 2:23. It was really odd. And then I would leave the house by about 3:30, get to the station at 4, and we'd go on the air at 4:30, and we were on the air until 10 a.m. And then what a lot of people, don't know, I know you know this, right? Like it looks like, oh, you just did a show and then you get to go home. And it's like, no. We still have several hours of work after that. So it was a typical, 8 or 9 hour day, because what you saw on the air the next day, albeit a lot of it was breaking news and it was live, and, you can't plan for that. A lot of the regular segments or things that were, shot and produced and written, days before. So we would always be planning pretty far ahead. And so then, if I had to go shoot a story, that would happen after the show. And then you would have time after the show, after the shoot, to put it all together. And that way it'd be ready for air.
How many years was that your schedule?
I started in 2004 with that schedule, and I ended in 2018. So end of 2018. So almost 15 years.
Was it ever normal? Or is there a rhythm to that eventually, or was there a struggle?
I think there's always a rhythm to anything, right? You do something long enough and it just becomes second nature. Was getting up at 2:30 always easy? No. But I think when you do something enough, it's just what you do, right? Yeah. You don't think about it. Just like people that work like overnights. I don't know how you do that, but They say the same thing. Well, you do it and you just get used to it. I always needed an alarm clock. I could never just wake up on my own. Sometimes I would wake up, at 2:00 and I think, oh, I have 20 more minutes left to sleep. Thinking it was like, you roll over and you got 3 hours left. That's what it felt. It was just like the best of the best when you looked over and you're like 20 more minutes. So yeah, it became a routine because it had to.
Right.
I look back now and I don't know if I could do that again. I really don't know if I could do that schedule again. So I did it for that long. And like I said, I look back and I really do not know how we did it. I have kids. And I used to think that, when the kids get into school, this schedule is going to get easier. And it just got harder because no one tells you when you have kids that eventually they're going to start to grow up, and then they're going to have sports to do. And then you have to take them to sports and you have to go to their games, and you become this Uber driver that you never even knew that was part of the job description of being a mother. And then their schedule is demanding, It was like you end work at 1 or 2 and then your second shift starts when it really matters. And it was, 8:30, 9:00 by the time we wrapped it up, and we just did it all over again the next day.
Well, after that long stint, all those years, what started to shift for you to where whether you knew in part or in whole, that it might be time to move on?
I think I never anticipated this shift inside of me to happen. I remember when I started this job, I started as an intern. I started in a way that really no one starts in this business as an intern and then gets a job in Phoenix. And it was a very unglamorous way to start, because it wasn't like I, started as an intern and became, the co-host of the show. There was quite a good stretch of years in between. And here we ended up in 2017 really was the year that I felt like this whole shift inside of me. My kids were getting older, And I really, felt like I was missing out on a lot of things with them because I was this tired, exhausted version of myself. I was, wishing for Friday often, which wasn't like me. It really never was. All the years that I worked there, it wasn't that I was praying for a weekend to come, but I was exhausted, and not just exhausted from lack of sleep. I was like exhausted inside, like my soul was tired. And I would lay there and at night and Sunday night, sometimes I would just cry because I didn't want to go to work the next day. I'm like, this isn't me. And I felt tension there. Things that were once easier were not. The schedule became extremely taxing for me. I'd sit at work and I would literally some days count down the hours because I just wanted to get home and get on with the things that I felt mattered more.
Right.
I would be sad when I'd miss out on games, late night games with the kids and so forth. And so I thought, well, what is happening inside of me? Like, where is this shift coming from? And about that time, I remember my husband and I had a lot of long conversations. And, what would it look like if I left? What would I be giving up? What would be the pros of leaving and what would be the cons of leaving? And there was a lot of back and forth of that. There was a lot of prayer. There was a lot of work with a therapist because something inside of me was changing and I didn't know what. Like, why did the job that I strive so hard to get and I worked so hard for so many years, why did that job now not excite me and fulfill me any longer? And again, I had ran this race of perfection for many, many years in that job. And yes, was I myself on TV? Of course, but I fought so many inside battles of like having to look a certain way and having to, put on this facade of like, I can do motherhood really well and I can have a full-time job with crazy hours really well. And it was this constant chase and this need for that external validation that was really what I started to just chase. And as long as I got that, I felt like, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, right? Like that external validation from humans is what I would say is, oh, that's God. Keep going. That's me. I got to keep doing this. And it got to a point where in 2018, towards the end of that year, my contract was coming up for renewal. So it wasn't like I had to completely quit, break a contract. It was just, I knew the decision had to be made. And after literally a year of some self-work with a therapist, lot of praying. And I said, God really finally revealed to me what I was supposed to do, because I think he changes the desires of our hearts. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that he does, because if he wouldn't, we would stay in places that we aren't called to stay in anymore. And sometimes they're very detrimental to our life, not necessarily a job, but maybe it's a toxic relationship you're in, or maybe it's an addiction of some sort. And, we pray for God to shift our way and help us. And I think some of the best ways he does it is eventually the desires that we once had for something change. And when I really realized that those prompts and that change of emotion and the hardships I kept feeling, the heaviness of that job, God was changing how I viewed this career. Yeah. And he was making it easier for me to leave it, because at the time it was not that. I was giving up a lot. I was giving up a salary, of course. I was giving up, I hate to say this, right? But we're all like, you're giving up okay, you're not the girl on TV anymore. Right. And which I look back now and leaving all of that, he changed me in a way that never would have been, I never would have become, and I'm still becoming, right? I'm never going to have this I have arrived moment ever. I'm just looking forward to the next shift that he puts in my heart and changes in my heart, because I'll know that that's him. And so it became clear. It became clear that I needed to step away from that. There was a lot of closed doors. It was really easy in the beginning of that career to keep walking through open doors. And so the opportunities would come, the door would open. I'm like, okay, great. That's exactly what I'm supposed to do. But here I was in the position that was no longer going to change. I could do that job, probably another contract if they graciously offered me one and maybe another one after that. But is that really what I want to do for the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't. I knew that I just didn't think that that's where I was going to find true satisfaction and true peace.
I love what you said there. And it actually harkened back. And again, this is the fun part of being a new podcast host and trying to do my homework on my guests. And with that, I love your Instagram feed. And going through some of your posts, I love that it's never just, look at me, I did something today. I love that there's always a perspective to things. And on one of your recent posts, it's a picture of you standing at the green wall, doing your thing. What I loved what you wrote there is how there were aspects of your job that always scared you, that were daunting, I'm sure, but that you had made up your mind with those things to do things that scared you. Did leaving scare you? Was that one of those big, scary moments, even with all these, confirmations that it looked like a green light to go? There had to still be some fear there for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there should always be a little healthy level of fear inside of us, because I think that if we do things that are comfortable every day, I truly don't think that we grow into the people that God always probably set forth us to become when he created us, when he knew us before the world knew us, and so forth. But it's real easy to get trapped in comfort.
Oh, yeah.
It feels better there, right? Than to walk forward and do something that we don't really know 100% how it's going to end up. But that idea of do one thing every day that scares you, the late Eleanor Roosevelt made that line famous. And I remember when I took the job, I was a senior in college, and that was, my spring semester of my senior year when they had asked. I got presented the job, after I auditioned, and I remember thinking, well, how am I going to do this? I don't know how to do this job. I don't know. I don't even know I don't know direction. North for me was always in front of me. How am I going to tell people how to get around town? My mom, I remember, she was still alive then, and she said, well, how are you going to do that job? You don't even know. You don't know how to get yourself around town. And you're like, I was a native. I'm born and raised here. I should know how to get around here, but no. And I remember reading that quote for the first time then. That was back in 2004. And I thought, okay, well, this scares me. But again, going back to, I didn't want to look back and say, what if I would have done that? What would that have been like? And having some level of regret of not at least trying. Because I thought, well, I could try it. And if I'm terrible, they'll fire me. So that's great.
Yeah, you'll know.
Write that off. And if I hate it, I could quit. I mean, no one likes to quit things, but I mean, there's always an out to almost everything if you really want one. Mm-hmm. And so, and then, that was 2004. And then, there we are in 2018. So then here I am presented with this new chapter that I have no idea what it's going to look like. Right. But I know God knows something that I don't know. And I can trust in that. Like, I am going to be a little scared. I am going to be a little fearful. But if I don't step forward, because every time we do that one sort of scary thing, and it doesn't have to be jumping out of an airplane, it doesn't have to be something big, magnetic, huge. Sometimes just the smallest step forward, small, scary steps forward at the end of our life add up to big, courageous, amazing things that we've done because God gave us the courage and bravery to do those things. I mean, and I think that the more I do those things, the more I feel like he's humbling me, because I don't do those things on my own. Because if I did that in my own strength, I would absolutely probably fail. Yep. And I would probably, I can't do that without him. And so, I was scared. I was scared because I didn't really know. I didn't have a plan, right? I literally left without a plan. But once again, man, we serve an amazing, awesome God that just has something worked up better than I could ever imagine. And some days I still feel like what am I supposed to be doing today? I'm kind of feeling a little wandery. And then I
Mm.
get this quiet sort of calming whisper on my heart that says, just keep walking forward. And I do believe like he's there in front of us to guide us. I think he's next to us to encourage us. And I think he goes behind us to sort of push us and motivate us to keep going. And so whatever that looks like for each of us in our life, it's not going to be big, grand accomplishment. Sometimes I think it's sort of stripping down what society has built us up to become and stripping us back down to what he's always wanted us to be. And that's capturing our heart, shifting it, transforming it, and setting us off on a different path that often looks very different than society, because his way, culture's way, they're very different.
Right. And ultimately drawing us that much closer to him. I mean, that's what hit me there, which with what you were just talking about is that, yeah, there are all those moments of fear that vary from day to day, but those fearful moments is also where your faith is built. That's the story I'm hearing, is that the more that you leaned into him, the more that you were trying to listen to him, the more that your heart was at peace with however the chips were going to fall. Is that fair?
Totally fair. Absolutely. And I literally thank him every day for that, because I know now, in just, 4 or 5 short years when I say 2017 sort of was that big shift inside. And I look at where I am now with him, and it's like a relationship that I just never want to stop pouring into, because I see how much he's poured into me. And like any good relationship in your life, when you don't actively pursue it, it crumbles. It gets a little stuck.
Yep.
Gets a little bit flat. And so I know that the more I pour into that relationship with him, the more my life flourishes, right? Like these last 2 years of being away from TV don't necessarily look exactly, even last year with COVID into it, that kind of derailed some of the plans that I was making to keep going forward. But it's all okay. It's all still working out. And every day, it's like, again, when I focus on grows, and when I focus on what he has done and what he is still doing and what I know he'll continue to do, then it always works out.
Right. Well, it's a richness for which there is no way to gauge that richness that he brings, because there's no category for that. And I honestly, even at my age, I feel like I'm still just trying to get a really good grasp of what that means, because there are days that I feel it with its full intensity, like the sun, and other days where I'm like, okay, where was it? It was just here. and how sad that we waver on stuff like that.
Well, I think, though, that that's what keeps us in that active pursuit of him, because I know that when I'm not, I tend to start veering, going my own way, and my own way never serves me in the long run.
Right. Well, and I don't hear an ounce of regret in you for your decision to leave news.
No, I really don't. I have I don't have a regret. Are there things I miss? There's people I miss.
Oh, sure.
But I think that I don't regret it. I don't regret leaving a schedule that was, I know would have broken me down to a place that I did not want to go.
Yeah.
Now, again, perspective, don't you love that? It's such a gift from him. Thank you. I would not have endured very well last year being in news with everything that went on in our world. And I look and I think that there was such a level of protection that he granted me by forcing me to make that not forcing, that sounds a little abrupt, but presenting me with that decision to have to make in 2018, not knowing what 2020 would hold at all. And I'm just grateful, because it put me in a position to help be strong for my kids and lead my kids towards a relationship with him and make that our first priority in our home. And 2020, as awful as it was for the world and our country, and in many ways, and people personally. There are so many things that I look back and I really do find a lot of gratitude in it because of the things that grew in my family and in each of our lives and our hearts.
I'm sure that there were many viewers in Phoenix who were surprised when Andrea announced that she was leaving TV news. But they had to appreciate that she was doing so to make the most of her time with her family. The first of a couple of takeaways for me is what Andrea said about the importance of being yourself. Honestly, this was something that I was thinking about for a while, long after the interview was over. I know it sounds like such a simple concept, but can we just be honest and admit that all too often we live our lives pretending to be someone we're not? It's time to drop the facade and live more authentically. The second is the reminder that God has an amazing way of letting us know when it's time to make a shift, as if to give us new eyes to see the situations where we are in a whole new way. I believe that it is in those moments that we can learn what it means to truly follow Him. I've got links to Andrea's website and her Instagram feed in the show notes. Give her a follow. Her feed is always so real and encouraging. Do you know someone who would be encouraged by this story? Send them a link. There's always room for more in the Nook. Your feedback means a lot to me, and that can take on a few different forms. You can email me. The address is Stephen@nookpodcast.com. That's Stephen with a V, @nookpodcast.com. You can join the Nook Facebook page. That's facebook.com/meetmeinthenook. And you can even buy me a coffee and support the show financially. Links for everything are down in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending a portion of your day with me, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook. The Nook is a production of Sozo Digital Media.